Clara Whitmore pressed her palms against the windowsill until her knuckles turned white, willing her face to stay still, while her cousin Evelyn laughed at her again, loud enough for the whole parlor to hear. 24 years old, unmarried, standing alone like a woman waiting for a husband, the summer rain might wash in. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. Welcome back, friend. If this story moves you, take a moment to subscribe and stay with me to the very end. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from tonight? I'd love to know how far Clara's story has traveled. The summer storm had been building over Charleston since noon, and by the time Clara Whitmore stepped down from her family's carriage at Bellamy House, the air smelled like hot earth and lightning. She did not want to be here. She had said so plainly that morning, and her mother had answered the way her mother always answered. You will go, Clara. You will smile. And you will not embarrass this family further by being unmarried and unpleasant in the same evening. So Clara had come. She had pinned her hair the way her mother liked it, worn the dress that did not flatter her, and arrived at her cousin's engagement supper with the same hollow expression she carried to every gathering where women her age were expected to either marry well or apologize for breathing. The parlor was already crowded when she stepped inside. Candles sputtered along the long table. Servants moved between guests with silver trays. The Bellamy women had outdone themselves, magnolia branches at every window, French lace draping the mantel, every detail arranged to remind the guests that Evelyn Bellamy was about to marry the wealthiest cotton trader in the Low Country. Clara found a place near the far window and stayed there. There you are, child. Aunt Mercy Whitmore appeared at her elbow, leaning hard on her cane. The old woman's voice was dry as sun-cured tobacco. I was beginning to think you'd had the good sense to fall out of the carriage. I considered it, ma'am. Pity you didn't. A small smile crossed Clara's mouth the first of the evening. Aunt Mercy was the only woman in either family who had never once asked her when she planned to be wed. Your cousin's bloomed up like a peach this season, Aunt Mercy said, watching the room. Suppose she's earned the right to her engagement. Or bought it. Hard to tell these days. Aunt Mercy. Hush. I'm too old to be polite, and you're too tired to pretend you don't agree. Across the parlor, Clara's mother caught her eye and gave a sharp little nod, the warning nod. Smile. Stand straighter. Do not embarrass me. Clara obeyed out of habit, the way she had obeyed since she was 9 years old, and first learned that her mother's love was a transaction she had never quite figured out how to pay for. A cluster of women had gathered near the punch table. Mrs. Reed, Mrs. Calhoun, 2 of the Bellamy aunts. Their voices carried the way women's voices carry when they want to be heard, but pretend they don't. 24 next month, isn't she? 25, I do believe. Goodness. And no offers at all. Not a one. Abigail Whitmore has tried every match in the parish, bless her heart. Bless her heart. 3 of the cruelest words in Southern English, and Clara had learned years ago to hear the iron underneath them. It ain't the looks alone, Mrs. Calhoun was saying, lowering her voice in the way that meant she wanted Clara to hear. It's the way she looks at a man like she's reading a deed of sale. Men don't fancy a woman who reads. My Samuel says a clever girl is a worried wife. Wise boy. Oh, but think of poor Abigail. 2 daughters wed and 1 still on her hands. Some flowers don't take to transplanting, I reckon. Clara stared at the rim of her glass and counted backward from 20. It was a trick Aunt Mercy had taught her. You can't punch a woman in church, child, and Charleston is a church. So you count and you breathe and you remember every name. Don't listen to those hens, Aunt Mercy muttered. They been pickin' bones since before you were born, and they'll still be pickin' bones when the worms get the rest of 'em. I'm not listening, ma'am. You're listening so hard your jaw's gone white. Loosen it. You'll crack a tooth. Clara loosened her jaw. The doors at the far end of the parlor opened, and a hush moved through the room like wind across wheat. Evelyn Bellamy stepped in on her father's arm, gowned in pale ivory silk, her dark hair coiled with seed pearls, her smile so practiced it looked stitched on. The room broke into soft applause. 2 girls actually sighed. Samuel Reed stepped forward to take her hand. He was tall and well-dressed, and exactly as memorable as a piece of furniture. Evelyn placed her fingers on his sleeve like she was setting down a teacup. "Cousin Clara," Evelyn called out, gay as a songbird. "I do declare I almost did not see you over there. You blend so well with the curtains tonight." A few women laughed, some did not. Clara's mother turned her head slowly, her face arranged in that particular look, the "don't you dare answer back" look that Clara had been trained to obey since girlhood. "Cousin," Clara said quietly, "many congratulations on your engagement." "Oh, thank you, thank you." Evelyn floated nearer, and the perfume of orange blossom came with her. "I was so afraid you would not come. After all, these gatherings can be so trying for a woman in your situation." "My situation, cousin? Why, Clara, dearest?" Evelyn's eyes were bright. "Unmarried, at your age, in this season." The room had gone quiet around them. Even the women at the punch table had stopped pretending not to watch. "Now, Evelyn," Mrs. Bellamy began, but her daughter rolled right past her. "I do not mean to be unkind, Clara. I simply worry for you. We all worry for you. Mama prays for you on Sundays, doesn't she, Mama? And Papa says he cannot remember the last gentleman who called at your house. Years, he said. Years." "Evelyn, dear." Aunt Mercy's voice was a flat blade. "That'll do. Auntie Mercy. I am only being honest. We are all family here, are we not? And surely it is kinder to speak the truth than to pretend." Evelyn turned her sweet, awful smile on the room. Poor Clara. Still no husband. Still no offer. Still standing by windows as if one might arrive with the rain. The laughter that followed was not loud. That was the cruelty of it. It was small, scattered laughter, the laughter of women who knew they should not laugh and did anyway because the woman being laughed at had not earned the right to be defended. Clara felt the heat climb up her throat and into her face. She felt every eye in the room. She felt her mother's stare drilling into the back of her skull. "Do not answer her. Do not embarrass me." 20, 19, 18. "Cousin Evelyn," she said, and her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "I wish you every happiness." "Oh, you sweet thing." 17, 16. "Clara, darling, you must let me throw you a small gathering soon. There are a few widowers in the parish. Older gentlemen, you understand, who might be persuaded to consider a girl who has been on the shelf a while. They are not particular generally, and neither at this point can you afford to be." The laughter was a little louder now. Clara's mother's face had gone the color of new brick. Not from anger at Evelyn, from mortification at Clara for standing there, for being there, for existing on the wrong side of 24. "Evelyn, that is enough!" Aunt Mercy snapped her cane, striking the floorboard once sharp as a gunshot. "Auntie, please. I am only speaking what everyone is thinking. There is no shame in age, only in pretending one does not have it. Clara does not pretend. We must love her for that." A male voice cut across the room. Quiet. Cold as a spring well. "Is cruelty considered entertainment in this house?" Every head turned at once. He was standing in the open doorway of the parlor, water dripping from the hem of his black coat onto the polished floor. He had not knocked. He had not been announced. He had simply walked in from the storm with a traveling case in his hand and an expression that could have curdled milk at 20 paces. The man was tall, lean through the shoulders, dark hair gone slightly silver at the temples. He looked like he had ridden hard and not stopped to be civil about it. Mrs. Bellamy made a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a curtsy. Mr. Hawthorne, we did not expect you until tomorrow, sir." Plainly. The storm, please do come in, sir. May I take your—" "I asked a question, ma'am." His eyes had not moved from Evelyn. "Is cruelty considered entertainment in this house? I should like an answer before I sit at your table." Clara could not breathe. She had heard the name Nathaniel Hawthorne all her life. Every woman in Charleston had. He owned half the rice fields north of the Ashley River and most of the cotton south of it. He had been a lawyer in his younger years and was said to have ruined 3 planters in a single courtroom afternoon. He had been widowed for 6 years, and had not in all that time paid court to a single woman. He was by every account Clara had ever heard a man whose favor lifted families and whose silence buried them. And he was looking at her cousin like a judge looks at a defendant. "Sir," Evelyn began, and her voice had thinned. "I do not believe we have been. We have not. I am Hawthorne. Your father wrote to me about a parcel of land. I have ridden 3 days to discuss it. I arrived in time to hear you laughing at a young woman who had done nothing to deserve it. So I will ask once more, Miss Bellamy, and I will ask plainly. Do you make sport of your cousins for amusement, or only when there is a room to perform for?" Evelyn's face had gone the color of wax. "Sir, I was only teasing." "Repeat what you said." "I beg your pardon. Repeat it." His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "What you just said to her. Repeat it in front of this room, and we shall all decide together whether it was teasing." The silence that followed was the worst silence Clara had ever stood inside of. Even the rain on the windows seemed to hush itself. "Sir, I cannot rightly remember the—" "Then I will help you, ma'am." His eyes were the color of slate. "You said poor Clara, still no husband, still no offer, still standing by windows, as if one might arrive with the rain. Did I hear you right?" Evelyn's lips moved soundlessly. "Did I hear you right, Miss Bellamy?" You did, sir." "Do you find that funny?" I meant no. Do you find that funny, ma'am?" His voice had gone so quiet that the women at the back of the room leaned forward to hear it. "Because the rest of this parlor laughed. I should like to know if their hostess agreed with them." Evelyn's mother stepped forward, hands fluttering. "Mr. Hawthorne, sir, surely there has been a misunderstanding." "I understand perfectly, ma'am. I have understood since I crossed the threshold. Your daughter has been speaking and her cousin has been bleeding, and the rest of you have been clapping like it was a recital." He looked around the room slowly, and a dozen pairs of eyes dropped to the floor. "Tell me, all of you, is this how a Charleston family welcomes its kin?" Nobody answered. Clara did not realize she was trembling until Aunt Mercy's hand closed quietly around her wrist. "Steady, child," the old woman whispered. "Steady. Don't you dare cry. Not now. Not in front of him." Nathaniel Hawthorne turned then. He turned slowly, deliberately, like a man choosing where to place his weight. And he looked at Clara. It was not a kind look. It was not gentle. It was something stranger and more terrible. It was the look of a man who saw her, who had walked into a room of 40 people and picked her out as the only one worth speaking to. "Miss Whitmore?" "Sir!" Her voice had not yet decided whether it would work. "Forgive me. I do not wish to add to your discomfort by making you the subject of further attention. But I find I cannot let what was just said pass without asking you something directly. May I—" Clara's mother made a small panicked sound from across the room. "Do not answer him. Do not encourage him. Do not, you may, sir." "Does your family often mistake your silence for permission?" The question landed in her chest like a stone dropped down a well. She felt the splash of it travel all the way to her feet. For a moment she could not speak. She had been waiting for someone to ask her that question for 15 years. She had been waiting for anyone to look at her and notice that the silence she carried everywhere was not consent. It was survival. She lifted her chin. "Only when it is convenient, sir." Something moved behind Nathaniel Hawthorne's eyes. It was not a smile. It was the idea of a smile. The place a smile might one day grow, if a man like him ever allowed such a thing. "I see." "Do you, sir?" "I believe I do, ma'am." Behind him, Mrs. Bellamy was wringing her hands. Beside Clara, her mother had not breathed in what felt like a full minute. "Sir." Evelyn tried again, and her voice was thin and high now, the voice of a woman who had felt the room turn against her and did not yet understand how to turn it back. "Sir, you must not let one little remark color your evening. Cousin Clara knows I love her dearly. We tease one another all the time, do we not?" "Clara?" Clara looked at her cousin, really looked at her, at the pearls in her hair, at the trembling smile, at the panic underneath the silk. "No, cousin," Clara said softly. "We do not." The parlor was so quiet she could hear the candles hissing. Nathaniel Hawthorne set his traveling case down beside the door. He removed his wet coat and handed it to a servant without looking at the boy. He stepped into the parlor properly, and every guest in the room shifted to make space for him, as if a tide had come in. "Mr. Bellamy," he addressed Evelyn's father, who had been standing frozen by the mantelpiece for the last 3 minutes. "I will discuss your land with you in the morning. I find I have lost my appetite for company tonight." Of course, Mr. Hawthorne, sir. Please, you must at least take some supper before you—" "I will not, sir. Thank you." He turned then and inclined his head slightly, just slightly, toward Aunt Mercy. "Ma'am, Mr. Hawthorne, and to you, Miss Whitmore." His eyes met Clara's. "I hope this evening improves, though I confess I do not see how it can." He walked out the way he had come in. The parlor stayed silent for a full count of 5 before someone Clara never knew who let out a long, low breath, and the noise of the room came rushing back like water filling a hole. Evelyn fled toward her mother. Mrs. Bellamy was already weeping into a handkerchief. Samuel Reed stood where he had been left holding his fiancée's gloves, looking like a man who had just been handed somebody else's coat. Clara's mother was at her side in 3 strides. "What did you say to him?" she hissed. "What did you say, Clara?" "I answered his question, Mama." You do not answer a man like Nathaniel Hawthorne. Oh dear God, what will people say?" "They will say what they always say, Abigail." Aunt Mercy's voice was iron now. "And for once they will be saying it about somebody other than your daughter. Now leave the child alone." "Aunt Mercy, I said leave her alone." Clara did not hear what came next. She had turned back toward the window, the same window she had been standing at when the evening began, and she pressed her palm flat against the cool glass, and breathed in and breathed out, and felt something move inside her chest that she had not felt in a very long time. He had heard her. He had walked into a room of 40 people, and he had heard her. Not the daughter the family was ashamed of, not the spinster the parish gossiped over, not the silent figure her mother dragged from supper to supper like a debt that would not come due. Her, Clara Whitmore, standing by a window, 24 years old, counting backward from 20 so she would not weep in public. Outside, the storm was breaking up over the harbor, and somewhere in the dark, a horse was being led around to the front of the house, and a man in a black coat was riding back out into the rain. And Clara Whitmore, who had spent her entire life learning how to disappear inside her own family's parlor, pressed her forehead against the glass, and understood for the first time she could remember that someone in this world had refused to look away from her. She did not yet know what it meant. She only knew that the woman who had walked into Bellamy House at the start of the evening would not be the woman who walked out. Clara did not sleep that night. She lay on her side and watched the storm drag itself out across the harbor, and every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice again. "Does your family often mistake your silence for permission?" She had answered him without thinking. She had answered him the way a woman answers a man who has already guessed the truth. By the time the house began to stir, she was already dressed. She came down the back stairs the way the servants did, hoping to slip out into the garden before her mother woke. She nearly made it. "Clara Whitmore, you stop right there." Her mother stood at the dining room door in her morning robe, her face pale and tight with a fury that had been building since midnight. "Mama, please, I was only going for a walk." "You will sit. You will sit, and you will explain to me what you imagine you accomplished last evening." "I did not accomplish anything." "You spoke to him." "He spoke to me first." "You answered him." Abigail Whitmore's voice cracked on the word. "Do you know who that man is? Do you have the faintest notion? Nathaniel Hawthorne does not speak to women in public parlors, Clara. He does not. He has not. In 6 years he has not. And last night you stood in your cousin's house and you talked back to him as though you were equals. I told him the truth, Mama. The truth." Her mother laughed once a sound with no joy in it. "The truth has never bought a woman a husband-child." "Then I am glad I have not been in the market for one." Her mother's hand moved before Clara saw it coming. The slap was not hard. It was not meant to be hard. It was meant to remind her of who decided in this house what a daughter was permitted to feel. Clara did not lift her hand to her face. She only stood there breathing while her cheek went hot. "You will go upstairs," her mother said quietly. "You will dress for breakfast, and when the Bellamys come over this morning, you will apologize to your cousin for the embarrassment you caused her in front of her future husband." "I did not embarrass her, Mama." "You will apologize, Clara." "No." The word came out before Clara had decided to say it. It hung between them like a struck match. Her mother stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign tongue. "What did you say to me?" "I said no, Mama. I will not apologize for being mocked." Aunt Mercy's voice came from behind them, dry and unsurprised. "Leave the girl be, Abigail. You have been wringing her like a dish rag since she was 12. You will wring her dry one of these mornings, and then you will wonder where your daughter went. This is none of your concern, Aunt. Everything in this house has been my concern since the day my brother died and left you holding it." The old woman tapped her cane against the floor. "Clara, go on out to the garden. Take some air." Clara went. She walked the gravel path twice before her hands stopped trembling. Her cheek still burned. She passed the rose hedge, the herb beds, the old sundial her grandfather had set in the lawn 40 years before, and she stopped there because her legs would not carry her any further. She did not hear him come up behind her. "Miss Whitmore." Clara turned so fast she nearly stumbled. Nathaniel Hawthorne stood 3 paces away, hat in hand, the morning sun cutting hard across his face. He looked older in the daylight. Tireder. The hard severity she had taken for arrogance the night before looked this morning more like a man who had not properly rested in years. "Mr. Hawthorne." Her voice was thin. I did not know you were still in the house. I returned an hour ago. Mr. Bellamy and I had business to settle." "Of course." He hesitated. It was the smallest hesitation, but Clara saw it, and something in her chest tilted. "Forgive me for approaching you without a chaperone, ma'am. I will only keep you a moment. I came to apologize." "To apologize, sir? For last night?" You have nothing to apologize for, sir. You spoke when no one else would. I made you the subject of a public scene, Miss Whitmore. Whatever my reasons, that was not mine to do. A woman of any sense will tell you that being defended in front of 40 people is its own form of injury." She had not expected this. She had braced herself for another version of him, formal, cool, the man who had cut her cousin to ribbons in front of a parlor, and instead he was standing in her family's garden with his hat in his hand, telling her he was sorry. "Sir, you did not embarrass me." "Then I embarrassed something else. Either way, I owe you the words." "You embarrassed the truth, sir. That was all." He looked at her then. Really looked at her the way he had looked at her in the parlor, as though she were a page he was reading line by line. And Clara, 24 years old, slapped that morning by her own mother, raised on the certainty that she was something to be apologized for, felt the whole of her body go still. "May I walk with you away, ma'am?" "You may, sir." They walked. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. Clara matched her steps to his, and she counted the gravel stones, and she tried to think of a single thing she had ever said to a man that had been worth saying. "My wife was very beautiful," Nathaniel said abruptly. Clara looked up. "Forgive me. That was not how I meant to begin." "How did you mean to begin, sir?" "I do not rightly know, ma'am." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I have not done this in a long while." "Done what, Mr. Hawthorne?" "Spoken honestly to a woman in a garden." Clara felt the heat rise up her throat and forced it down. "Then I shall make it easier for you, sir. Speak plainly." He gave her a look out of the corner of his eye that she would remember for the rest of her life. "My wife was named Caroline," he said. "She was admired by every household in Charleston. She had a laugh that filled rooms. She wore her clothes well, and she danced well, and she could quote scripture in 3 languages, and she was the cruelest woman I have ever shared a roof with." "Sir, it is not a thing I tell people. I am telling you because I owe you something honest, and I have very little else to offer." "I do not understand why you are telling me at all." "Because last night I watched your cousin laugh at you," he said quietly. and I heard your mother forbid you from defending yourself, and I saw that you had been trained into that silence the way a horse is trained to a bit. And I have seen that training before, Miss Whitmore. I lived inside a house where it was used. Only in my house my wife was the one holding the rein." Clara did not answer. She could not. Her throat had closed around something she did not have a name for. "There was a maid in our household," he went on, and his voice had gone very flat now. "A girl of 16. Caroline did not like her. Caroline did not like several of the servants, but she had a particular distaste for this one. She said the girl looked at her improperly. She said the girl was insolent. She had her dismissed without a reference in winter, with no family within 50 miles. What happened to her, sir?" "They found her in the river 2 weeks later, ma'am." Clara stopped walking. Nathaniel stopped beside her. "My wife wept at the funeral," he said. "She wept beautifully. Everyone remarked on it. I stood next to her in the churchyard, and I understood for the first time that I had married a performance." "Sir, I do not know what to—" "You do not need to say anything, Miss Whitmore. I did not tell you for sympathy. I told you because last night when I asked you whether your family mistook your silence for permission, you answered me only when it is convenient. And in that moment, I understood that you have been living in a smaller version of the house I lived in. And I could not in good conscience let you go on believing that you imagined it." Clara realized she was crying. She had not cried in front of a man since she was 9 years old. She had not even cried in front of her mother in years. She turned her face away embarrassed, but Nathaniel did not look away from her. He did not move closer either. He only stood there and let her cry. And after a long moment, he said very gently, "I am very sorry, ma'am. I did not mean to grieve you." "You did not grieve me, sir." "What did I do then?" "You named it." He was quiet. "No one has ever named it before," she said. "Then, that," he said, "is the first crime of your family." A bell rang somewhere up at the house. The breakfast bell. Clara wiped her face quickly with the back of her hand. "I must go in, sir." "Of course." "Mr. Hawthorne." "Yes, ma'am." "Why did you tell me about your wife?" He held her eyes for what felt like a long time. "Because I wanted you to know what I was," he said finally, "before I asked you anything else." Clara walked back to the house with her heart beating so loud she was certain her mother would hear it through the walls. She did not yet know what anything else meant. But by the time she reached the dining room door, she understood that the morning had changed something inside her that she would not be able to change back. Breakfast was a small disaster. Evelyn arrived with her mother shortly after the meal began, and the two of them sat opposite Clara like jurors. Evelyn had not slept any better than Clara had, judging by the shadows under her eyes, but she had painted them over carefully, and her smile this morning was a different kind of smile altogether, smaller, sharper, the smile of a woman who had spent a night thinking very hard. "Cousin Clara, dearest, you look unwell." "I am quite well, thank you, Evelyn." "Are you certain you look as if you did not sleep?" "I slept enough." Evelyn took a careful sip of her coffee. "Mr. Hawthorne is still on the property, I understand." "So I have been told." "Did he speak to you again this morning?" The dining room went silent. Clara felt her mother's eyes on her. She felt Aunt Mercy's. She felt Samuel Reed sitting beside Evelyn lift his fork halfway to his mouth and forget to put it in. "He apologized to me, Evelyn, for the disturbance last evening." "How gracious of him." Evelyn's voice could have cut glass. "And you accepted his apology, of course." "I did." "Cousin." Evelyn set her cup down very precisely. "May I speak to you in private after breakfast?" "Evelyn, dear," her mother began. "Just for a moment, Mama. Cousin to cousin. There is a small matter I wish to discuss with her, and I would not wish to embarrass anyone at the table." "Of course, dear." Clara felt the trap close around her ankle and said nothing. After breakfast, Evelyn led her into the small parlor at the back of the house and shut the door behind them. Her smile was gone now. She did not bother to pretend. "What did he say to you in the garden?" "I beg your pardon." "In the garden, Clara, just now. I watched you from the upstairs window. What did Nathaniel Hawthorne say to you?" He apologized for the scene last night. For an hour, cousin. It was not an hour. It was 43 minutes, dearest. I counted. Nathaniel Hawthorne does not spend 43 minutes apologizing to anyone. Evelyn stepped closer. Now, what did he say to you? That is between him and me, Evelyn. Oh. Evelyn's smile came back thin and hard. Oh, Clara, you poor little thing. You think he means it. I have not said what he means, cousin. You think a man like that sees you. After 24 years of nobody seeing you, you have decided that the wealthiest widower in Charleston has been struck through the heart by your clever conversation in a garden. I have decided nothing of the kind. Listen to me, cousin. Evelyn's voice had dropped very low. I am going to tell you something because you are family, and because I have a Christian duty to spare you from yourself. Men like Nathaniel Hawthorne do not marry women like you. They pity women like you. They notice you because pitying you costs them nothing. And then they go home, and they marry somebody who looks well on a porch. Clara's hands had gone very cold. Are you finished, Evelyn? I am not, dearest. I am barely begun. There are things about Nathaniel Hawthorne that you do not know. There are things about his first wife. There are things about his household. I have written to a friend in Beaufort this morning, and I expect a reply within the week. And when it comes, I shall take very great pleasure in showing it to you, cousin, because I would hate for you to embarrass yourself further. You are jealous. The word came out of Clara's mouth before she had given it permission, and Evelyn rocked back as if she had been struck. What did you say to me? I said you are jealous, Evelyn. Of what, Clara? Of the fact that he saw me. Clara's voice was shaking, but she did not stop. Of the fact that for 1 minute in a parlor full of 40 people, every eye in that room was on the spinster cousin and not on the bride. You cannot bear it. You were the prettiest woman in that room last night, and he did not look at you once. You ungrateful little... I am not ungrateful, cousin. I have nothing to be grateful for. The parlor door opened. Aunt Mercy stood in it leaning hard on her cane. Evelyn Bellamy, your mother is asking after you. Auntie, we are speaking. You are finished speaking. Out, both of you. Clara, with me. Evelyn went with one last burning look back over her shoulder. When the door had closed, Aunt Mercy lowered herself slowly into a chair and looked at Clara for a long time without speaking. Child, sit down. Clara sat. You are about to make a great deal of noise in this town. You know that, don't you? Aunt Mercy, I have not. Hush. I have been watching this since the day you were born, child. Your mother decided when you were 6 years old that you were the daughter she could afford to lose. She decided your sister was the pretty one, and you were the practical one, and that was that. I have watched her grind you down for 18 years, and I have said nothing because in this family, a woman's mouth is the thing she is permitted to use last. Aunt Mercy, listen to me, Clara. A woman can survive being disliked. She can. Whole long lives have been built on it. But what she must not survive is being taught to dislike herself. Because once she has been taught that she will marry the first man who gives her permission to breathe, and she will spend the rest of her days mistaking gratitude for love. He has not asked anything of me. I know he has not, child. Then why are you telling me this? Because he is going to. And when he does, you must not say yes because you are tired. You must say yes because you are certain. There is a difference, and your mother will not teach it to you, so I am teaching it now. Clara looked at her hands. I do not know if I am capable of being certain, Aunt Mercy. Then learn, child. You have time. She did not, as it turned out, have time. 2 evenings later in the library at Bellamy House, where Clara had gone to escape the sound of her mother's voice. For 1 quiet hour, she turned a corner and nearly walked into Nathaniel Hawthorne. He had a book in his hand. He was alone. They both stopped. Neither moved. Miss Whitmore. Mr. Hawthorne. I did not mean to startle you. You did not. He looked down at the book in his hand and seemed to remember he was holding it. He set it down on the table beside him very slowly. Clara watched his fingers and her chest hurt. Miss Whitmore, may I ask you something? You may, sir. Has your cousin spoken to you about me? Clara's blood went still. Why do you ask, sir? Because I have been told, ma'am, by a stable boy who heard it from a kitchen maid, who heard it from your cousin's lady's maid, that Miss Bellamy has written to a Mrs. Henrietta Calhoun in Beaufort, inquiring about my late wife. He said it calmly, but his eyes were very dark. And I find I would rather hear from you, ma'am, than from a stable boy, what your cousin intends to do with whatever she receives in reply. Clara opened her mouth. She closed it again. In the corridor outside the library, the sound of Evelyn's voice, too loud, too pleased, calling for a servant, was already coming closer. Clara could hear Evelyn's heels coming down the corridor before she could think of a single thing to say. Sir, I please, you must. Tell me plainly, ma'am. She is going to use it against you. Whatever the woman in Beaufort writes, Evelyn will use it. Tonight if she can. She told me herself. Nathaniel's face did not move, but something behind his eyes shifted, and Clara understood in that small movement that she was looking at the man who had ruined 3 planters in a single afternoon. How much did she tell you? That there were things about your wife, about your household. She said I would embarrass myself if I did not know them. And you came here anyway. I came here because I could not stand my mother's voice another hour, sir. The corner of his mouth moved. It was not a smile. But it was the second time he had almost smiled at her, and Clara felt the heat of it down to her wrists. Miss Whitmore. Yes, sir. Whatever your cousin has been told or thinks she has been told, I will not lie to you about. Ask me anything. Ask me now. Before she comes through that door. Sir, Ask me, ma'am, quick. The maid. The girl who died. Were you? I was in Charleston, ma'am, 40 miles away. I learned of it by letter 3 days after they buried her. I did not know my wife had dismissed her until the funeral was over. I did not know she was dead until the parish wrote to ask if we wished to pay for the stone. And did you? I paid for the stone, Miss Whitmore. I paid for her mother's passage home to Virginia. I have paid for every funeral in 3 counties, since every time I have heard of a girl turned out of a household with no place to go. I will pay for them until I die. It will not bring her back. Sir, the library door opened. Evelyn Bellamy stood in it, smiling with a folded letter in her hand. Why, Cousin Clara, and Mr. Hawthorne, together, alone, without a chaperone. Whatever will the parish say? Miss Bellamy. Sir, I was hoping to find you. I have just received correspondence I believe will interest you a great deal. Have you, ma'am? Oh, yes, sir. She tapped the letter against her palm. From a Mrs. Henrietta Calhoun in Beaufort. You will remember her, I am sure. She and your late wife were quite close, I am told. Nathaniel did not answer. I had thought to read it privately, sir, but I find myself moved to share it with the family this evening after supper. I do hope you will stay. I would not miss it, Miss Bellamy. Evelyn's smile faltered for 1/2 second before she recovered it. Clara saw the falter. She saw it, and something in her chest went cold and steady. Cousin Clara, Mama is asking for you. I imagine she is. Now, dearest. In a moment, Evelyn. Now, Clara. I said in a moment, cousin. For a beat, the only sound in the library was the clock on the mantel. Then Evelyn turned on her heel and walked out, and the click of the door behind her was harder than it had any reason to be. Nathaniel let out a long, slow breath. Miss Whitmore, you will not stay for what is coming this evening. I will, sir. Ma'am, I will, Mr. Hawthorne. I will not let her speak about you in that room and not be there. I will not. You do not know what is in that letter. Neither do you. I know what was in my house, ma'am. That is enough. Then trust me to know it too. He looked at her for a long time. Clara had the strangest feeling that he was making a decision about her that had nothing to do with the letter, or the evening, or the family at all. Miss Whitmore, he said finally, you are a very dangerous woman. I have never been called dangerous in my life, sir. Then your family has been even blinder than I had supposed. Supper that evening was the quietest supper Bellamy House had served in 20 years. 12 places had been laid. The Whitmores, the Bellamys, the Reeds, two cousins from Beaufort who had ridden in that morning. Aunt Mercy at the foot of the table watching the room like a hawk over a field. And Nathaniel Hawthorne seated at Mrs. Bellamy's right hand because nobody had quite dared to seat him anywhere else. Clara sat across from him. She did not look at him once. Evelyn waited until the dessert plates had been cleared. She waited until the women had refused the second pot of coffee and the men had refused the third decanter of wine. She waited until the candles had burned down to the sockets and the room was as still as it was going to get. Then she took the letter out of her sleeve. "Mama, may I beg the company's indulgence for a moment? I have received some correspondence from an old friend that I believe touches on a matter of family concern. Evelyn, dear, perhaps after the men have... Now is best, Mama, with everyone present." Clara felt her mother stiffen on her left. She felt Aunt Mercy lean forward on her cane. "It concerns Mr. Hawthorne, Mama, and our cousin Clara." The word Clara hit the room like a stone in a still pond. "Evelyn," Mr. Bellamy began. "Papa, please. I would not raise this if I did not believe Clara's reputation was at stake." Evelyn unfolded the letter with the care of a woman opening a knife. Mrs. Henrietta Calhoun of Beaufort was an intimate friend of the late Mrs. Caroline Hawthorne. I wrote to her 3 days ago when I observed Mr. Hawthorne paying particular attention to my cousin in this very house. I did so, Mama, because I could not in conscience stand by and watch our cousin walk into the same household that... Read the letter, Miss Bellamy." Nathaniel's voice was perfectly calm. Evelyn's eyes flicked up to his and back down. "I beg your pardon, sir." "Read the letter, ma'am, the whole of it, aloud, to the room. Since you have brought it to the table, do not now pretend it is too delicate." A long silence. Mrs. Bellamy reached for her daughter's wrist. "Evelyn, perhaps we should—" "Mama." Evelyn's voice had gone sharp. "I shall read what is pertinent. You shall read all of it, ma'am, or you shall read none of it." Mr. Bellamy cleared his throat unhappily. Samuel Reed had gone the color of a fish belly. Aunt Mercy at the foot of the table was smiling a small, terrible smile that Clara had never seen on her face before. "Very well." Evelyn lifted the letter and her voice. "My dear Miss Bellamy, I received your letter this past Tuesday, and write in haste as the matters you raise concern the dearest friend of my youth, the late Caroline Hawthorne. I shall not pretend to speak ill of the dead, but I shall tell you what I told her own mother before the funeral and what no soul in Charleston has ever asked me to tell since. Caroline was a difficult woman. She was harder on her servants than any mistress I ever knew. She had a temper that frightened men twice her age. The girl who drowned Sally, her name, was only 16 years old. That girl was driven from the house in a January storm with nothing but the dress on her back. Caroline gave the order. Mr. Hawthorne was not in the county. When he learned of it, he wept. He wept, Miss Bellamy. I saw him weep with my own eyes at the churchyard. He has paid for that girl's stone and her mother's keep and 3 more like her every year since. If your cousin Miss Whitmore has caught his attention, then I shall tell you plainly what I told my own daughter. There is no better man in the Low Country. There has not been since Caroline put him in the ground with her cruelty. Yours, and so on, Henrietta Calhoun. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the parlor had ever held before. Evelyn's hand had gone slack around the letter. She was staring at the paper as if it had struck her. "Read the last line again, Miss Bellamy." "Mr. Hawthorne, please." "The last line, ma'am, aloud. There is no better man in the Low Country." "Thank you." Evelyn's mother had begun to cry quietly into her napkin. Mr. Bellamy was studying his wine glass as though it owed him money. The cousins from Beaufort were looking anywhere except at the head of the table. Nathaniel set down his coffee cup very gently. "Miss Bellamy." "Sir?" "You wrote to Mrs. Calhoun expecting a different letter, did you not?" "Aye, sir. I was only concerned for my cousins." "You were concerned, ma'am, that a man you had judged to be in your reach had instead spoken to a woman you had judged to be beneath his notice. You wrote to Beaufort hoping for a scandal. The scandal you received was that there is none." His voice had not risen once. You called your family to this table tonight to humiliate me, ma'am. Instead, you have only humiliated yourself. I do not require an apology. I require an answer. Why? Sir, Why, Miss Bellamy? Evelyn's face had gone the color of curdled cream. Her hands were shaking. The letter slid out of her fingers and landed on the tablecloth between two candlesticks. Because she is plain. The word came out of Evelyn before she could stop it. I beg your pardon, ma'am. Because she is plain, sir, and clever, and 24, and unmarried. And I have been beautiful in this parish since I was 15 years old, and not one man has ever looked at me the way you looked at her in the parlor. Not one. Not Samuel. Not anyone. And I will not. Evelyn. Her mother was on her feet. Evelyn. I will not pretend it is right. I will not pretend I am happy for her. I have done everything a woman is supposed to do. I have been pleasant. I have been pretty. I have been useful. And she been pretty. I have been useful. And she has done none of it, Mama, none of it. And a man like that walks into a room and the only person he sees is her. Clara was not breathing. Evelyn was crying now. Real tears. Ugly tears, the tears of a woman who had been holding something behind her teeth for 10 years and had finally bitten through it. Nathaniel stood up. He stood the way a man stands at the front of a courtroom. Not tall, not broad. Set. Clara had never seen a man take up space like that without raising his voice. Miss Bellamy, I will say this once. Sir, please. You call her plain because you are terrified that beauty is the only power you have, and you have spent so many years sharpening that single weapon that you have not noticed it dulling in your hand. Miss Whitmore has been quiet for 24 years, not because she had nothing to say, ma'am, but because nobody in this family ever asked her. The first time a man asked her in this very house, she answered, "That is not her crime. That is not her fault. That is yours." Mr. Hawthorne. Mrs. Bellamy was on her feet now. I am not finished, ma'am. Sir, you are a guest in this house? I am a guest, ma'am, who has just heard a young woman raised in your charge admit that she summoned her family to a public table in order to slander a cousin she has wounded for years. I will be finished, Mrs. Bellamy, when I am finished. Clara's mother had turned in her chair to face her. Abigail Whitmore's eyes were hot and glassy, and Clara knew that look. She had known it her whole life. It was the look that meant, get up. It was the look that meant, we are leaving. It was the look that meant, you will never be invited back into this house if you do not stand up right now. Clara, get up. Mama. Clara Whitmore, you will get up from that chair this instant, and you will come home with me, and we will not speak of any of this ever again. Mama, Now, Clara. Clara looked at her mother. She looked at her the way Nathaniel Hawthorne had looked at her in the parlor line by line. The hard mouth, the bony hands, the fury behind the fury which was fear, and behind the fear which was a lifetime of being a woman who had been told just like Clara that her worth was measured in the men she could secure for her daughters. No, Mama. What did you say to me? I said no. Clara. I have been getting up from chairs since I was 9 years old, Mama. I have been getting up because you asked me to, and sitting down because you asked me to, and being quiet because you asked me to, and tonight I am not going to do it. I am not going to do it because Cousin Evelyn is right about one thing. He is the first man who has ever looked at me. And you would have me leave this room before he has finished speaking, because if I do not, you might have to admit that the daughter you have been ashamed of for 24 years has become in the space of 3 days the only daughter in this room a man like Nathaniel Hawthorne would cross a parlor for. And you cannot bear it, Mama. You cannot bear it any more than Evelyn can. How dare you? I dare, Mama. I dare because I am tired. Aunt Mercy made a sound at the foot of the table. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a sob. Clara could not tell. Clara, if you do not stand up, you will, what Mama, disown me. Send me away. Where, Mama? To which household? With what dowry? You have been telling me for 10 years that no man would have me. You have made certain of it. You have refused suitor after suitor on grounds I was never permitted to know. You have presented me at supper after supper as a daughter you could not give away. And now, when one finally looks at me, you would rather I die unmarried in your house than be chosen in someone else's. That is not... It is Mama. The room did not breathe. Nathaniel had not moved. He was watching Clara the way a man watches something he has been waiting his whole life to see. Mr. Hawthorne, Miss Whitmore, I do not know what you came to this house for. I do not know what your business with Mr. Bellamy was. I do not know what made you stop in the parlor doorway and speak when no one else would. But I know that you did. And I know that since you did, I have not slept properly, and I have not breathed properly, and I have not been able to think about a single thing in this world, except that for 1 minute in a room of 40 people I was seen. Ma'am, I am not asking you for anything, sir. I have nothing to offer you. I will leave this room, and I will leave this house, and I will go to my Aunt Mercy, and I will live there, and I will be glad to have done it. But I would not. I could not leave this room without saying in front of all of them that you are not what my cousin tried to make you. You are not a man who brings death and scandal. You are a man who has spent 6 years paying for someone else's. And whatever the parish says of you tomorrow, I will not be one of the voices saying it. She stopped. She had run out of breath. Nathaniel walked the length of the table. He walked past Mrs. Bellamy, past the Reeds, past the cousins from Beaufort, past Clara's mother, who had gone perfectly still in her chair, with one hand over her mouth. He stopped behind Clara. He put one hand very briefly on the back of her chair. Miss Whitmore, may I speak now? You may, sir. I did not come to this table tonight to ask you anything. I came because your cousin had a letter. I am asking you now because I will not let another hour pass in which you do not know. Know what, sir? That I do not love you because you are easy to admire, ma'am. I love you because you are real when everyone else in this room is performing. I love you because last night I asked you a question in a parlor, and you answered it without flinching. I love you because in the last 3 days, you have made me remember what a woman sounds like when she has not been broken into smaller pieces. I would have crossed 3 counties for less. Clara could not speak. I am not asking for an answer tonight, ma'am. I am asking only that you know it. Whatever happens next in this room, whatever your mother does, I have not been a man who gave love easily, and I am not now. But I am giving it, Clara. I am giving it to you in front of every soul at this table, because I will not have it said ever that I let you walk out of this house tonight wondering. The silence was so complete Clara could hear the candle flames. Her mother spoke first. If you walk out of this room with him, Clara, you will not come back into mine. Clara stood up. She set her napkin beside her plate. She pushed in her chair. She looked at the woman who had borne her, slapped her, dressed her, paraded her, and never once used her name like it was something good. Then I will finally know, Mama, what your love was worth. She did not look back. She did not need to. Aunt Mercy was already reaching for her cane. She could not have told anyone afterward what the drive was like. She remembered that Aunt Mercy held her hand the whole way. She remembered that the old woman did not speak. She remembered that somewhere between the second crossroads and the river, she began to cry. Not the small, dignified crying of a woman in a parlor, but the deep, raw, helpless crying of a child who has finally been allowed to put down a weight she has been carrying for too long. Aunt Mercy let her cry. When the carriage pulled up at Mercy's small house outside the city, the old woman simply patted Clara's hand once and said, "There is a bed made up, coffee in the morning. We will not speak of any of it tonight." Aunt Mercy! Tomorrow, child. Aunt Mercy, I do not know what I have done. You have done a thing that took you 24 years to do, Clara. You will not understand it tonight. You will scarcely understand it in a month. Now hush. Clara hushed. She slept for 14 hours. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Aunt Mercy quarreling with her cook downstairs about the price of eggs, and for a long moment she did not remember where she was. Then she remembered. Then she remembered all of it. Then she sat up in the strange bed and put her face in her hands and waited for the panic to come. It did not come. What came instead was a stillness she had not felt since she was a girl. He had stood up at the table. He had crossed the length of it. He had put his hand on the back of her chair. He had said her name in front of 40 people. She got up. She dressed. She went down to breakfast. Aunt Mercy was already at the table reading 3 newspapers at once. She did not look up. "Sit, child." "Aunt Mercy." "Sit. Eat. The town has been talking since sunrise, and I do not propose to discuss any of it on an empty stomach." Clara sat. The first letter arrived before noon. It was from her mother. Clara recognized the handwriting before Aunt Mercy had finished slicing the seal. "Read it, child, or do not read it. It is your choice." Clara read it. She read it twice. Then she set it down on the breakfast table and looked out the window for a very long time. "Aunt Mercy." "Yes, child." "She says I have killed her." "She has been dying of you for 24 years, Clara. It is the only thing she has ever been truly good at. She says the parish is saying, I know what the parish is saying. What is the parish saying, Aunt Mercy?" The old woman set down her newspaper. "The parish is saying, child, that you ran off in the night with Nathaniel Hawthorne, that you have been compromised, that your mother is destroyed, that Evelyn Bellamy has taken to her bed and refuses to see Samuel Reed, who has. And this part I find very interesting, written to his own father in Savannah this morning, to say he is rethinking the engagement. Rethinking it, child. On what grounds? On the grounds, my dear, that he sat at that supper last night and watched the woman he was about to marry strip her own skin off in front of 40 people. Samuel Reed is not a clever man, but he is not a stupid man either. And what he saw last night was the woman he was going to share a bed with for the rest of his life. And he did not like the look of her." Clara stared. That is the news from Charleston this morning, child. Drink your coffee." Clara drank her coffee. The second letter arrived at 3 in the afternoon. It was from Nathaniel. It was 4 lines long, written in a hand that was harder and squarer than Clara had imagined. "Miss Whitmore, I am at Hawthorne House. I will not call upon you uninvited. I do not wish to add to the talk. When you are ready to receive a visitor, send word and I will come with whatever witnesses you and your aunt require for propriety. I am not in a hurry. Yours in Hawthorne." Clara read it 3 times. "Aunt Mercy." "Yes, child." "He says he is not in a hurry. Then he is the only person in 3 counties who is not, child. He says he will not call uninvited. Then he has more sense than the lot of them put together. Write back to him." "What do I say?" "You say what is true, child. You always say what is true. That is the only rule from this morning forward that you must keep." Clara wrote back, "Mr. Hawthorne, I am at my Aunt Mercy's. I am well. I do not yet know what I want, sir. I would not wish to ask you to come on uncertain ground, but I would also not wish you to think my silence is a refusal. Will you give me a week? Yours, Clara Whitmore." He gave her a week. He did not call. He did not write again. He did not send flowers or tokens or any of the cluttered nonsense Clara had watched men send to her cousins for 10 years. Once on the 4th day, a basket of fresh bread arrived from a baker in town, with a card that said, "Only for Miss Whitmore," and her aunt and Aunt Mercy looked at it and said, "He has paid the baker for a month, child, so you do not have to thank him for it." Clara wept over the bread. She could not say why. By the end of the week, she had stopped weeping at unexpected things, and she had stopped jumping when the doorbell rang, and she had begun to sleep through the night for the first time in years. Aunt Mercy did not push her. The old woman simply set a place for her at every meal and put a stack of books on her bedside table, and once a day asked her one question, "What do you want today, child?" and accepted whatever answer Clara gave. On the 8th morning, Clara said, "I want to see him. Send word, child." She sent word. Nathaniel came that afternoon with 2 witnesses. One was a clergyman from his own parish. The other was a woman Clara had never met, who introduced herself as Mrs. Eliza Hawthorne, his late wife's sister, and who had ridden up from Beaufort that morning at his request, specifically so that the visit could not be construed by a single Charleston tongue as anything improper. Clara almost laughed when she understood what he had done. He had brought his dead wife's sister. He had brought the one woman in 3 counties whose presence in Aunt Mercy's parlor would tell every gossip in the parish, whatever this is, his wife's own family approves of it. Mr. Hawthorne. Miss Whitmore. You think of everything, sir. I think of you, ma'am. That is all I have been doing for a week. He did not stay long. He sat in Aunt Mercy's small parlor and spoke of practical things, of his house, of his land, of his servants, and the way they were paid, and the way they were treated. He did not speak of love. He did not speak of marriage. He told her very plainly what his life looked like from the inside, so that if she chose to enter it, she would not be entering blind. Miss Whitmore, I am not asking you anything yet. I know, sir. I will not ask you anything until you have seen the house. I will not ask you anything until you have met my people. I will not ask you anything until you have spent enough time inside my life to know whether you can stand inside it for 40 years. And if I cannot, sir, then you will tell me, ma'am, and I will let you go without bitterness. You make it sound very easy, sir. I assure you, Miss Whitmore, it will not be easy. But I will not have it said ever that I rushed you. I have been rushed once in my life, ma'am, and a girl drowned for it. I will not do it twice. Clara did not cry then. She had cried enough for 1 week. She only nodded and held his eyes and said, "Thank you, sir. For the bread." A muscle moved in his jaw. Aunt Mercy told you. Aunt Mercy tells me everything, sir. Then your aunt and I shall get on very well, ma'am. You already do, sir. She has told me twice this morning that I am to marry you whether I wish to or not. Aunt Mercy from the doorway said calmly, I said no such thing, child. I said you were a fool if you did not. There is a difference. Nathaniel, for the first time since Clara had met him, laughed. It was a short laugh, a startled laugh, the laugh of a man who had not used the muscle in a long while. And Clara, sitting across from him in a borrowed parlor with her dead aunt's furniture around her, understood that she had made a man laugh who had not laughed in 6 years, and she put her hand quietly over her mouth so that she would not say something foolish. He came back the next week, and the next, and the week after that. He came always with witnesses. He came always with a reason. He came once with the deed to a small parcel of land near Aunt Mercy's house, which he gave to Mercy outright on the grounds that her property line had been wrongly drawn 40 years before by a surveyor who he had now confirmed had been drunk. He came once with 3 books, not flowers, not jewelry, 3 books which he had marked in places he thought she might wish to read first. He came once on a Tuesday with nothing at all and sat in the parlor for an hour and spoke to her aunt about the price of cotton and looked at Clara only twice, and Clara could not eat for the rest of the day. In the 2nd month she went to Hawthorne House. She went with Aunt Mercy. She went with Mrs. Eliza Hawthorne, who had become over the autumn the closest thing to a friend Clara had ever had. She went on a Wednesday in October when the rice fields were being harvested, and the whole estate smelled of cut grass and wet earth. It was not a beautiful house. It was a working house. It was clean. It was sound. It was much smaller than Bellamy House and much older, and there were places where the floorboards had been worn into hollows by 60 years of feet. The servants did not bow. They nodded. The cook came out of the kitchen to meet Clara herself, wiping flour off her hands, and looked Clara up and down with the bluntness of a woman who had been running a household for 30 years. Mr. Hawthorne speaks well of you, ma'am. Does he, Mrs. Brown? He does, ma'am. He don't speak well of many, so you will forgive me if I look you over. Look as long as you like, ma'am. The cook looked. Then, after a long moment, she said, You will do, and went back to the kitchen. Clara turned and saw Nathaniel watching her from across the hall. He had heard the whole exchange. His face did not change, but his eyes. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had just watched his cook approve his future wife, and Clara understood for the first time that this was what a household was. Not a parlor, not a wedding lace, not a dowry, a cook and flour and a parcel of land, and a man across a hallway looking at a woman as if she were the answer to a prayer he had never let himself say out loud. He did not propose that day. He did not propose for 2 more months. When he did in February of 1817, he did it badly. He did it sitting on the porch of Aunt Mercy's house in front of Aunt Mercy and Mrs. Eliza Hawthorne, and a clergyman who had been called for the express purpose of being a witness. And he did it in a voice so flat that Clara for one terrible moment thought he was telling her he had changed his mind. "Miss Whitmore, I have been in your aunt's parlor 16 times. I have been instructed by your aunt, by my sister-in-law, and by my own kitchen that if I do not ask you today, I shall be asked to leave the county. I am asking you today. Will you marry me, ma'am?" "That is the worst proposal I have ever heard of, sir." "I know, ma'am." "You will have to do better, sir." He did better. He stood up from his chair. He crossed the porch. He took her hand in front of every witness, and he said, "I have lived inside one house in my life. Miss Whitmore and I lived inside it badly. I do not know what I am. I do not know what I will become. But I know that since the night I walked into Bellamy House out of the rain, I have not gone a single day without thinking of you. I have not slept a full night without dreaming of you. I have not made a decision in 3 months without first asking myself whether you would think well of it. I am 32 years old, ma'am, and I have not done that for any soul on this earth, including the woman I was married to. Will you marry me, Clara? Will you let me be a better man inside a better house? Will you have me?" Clara said yes. She said it 3 times because her voice cracked the first time, and Aunt Mercy made her say it again to be sure. They were married in March. It was a small wedding. Mercy, Eliza, the clergyman, Mrs. Brown the cook, 2 of Nathaniel's old law partners, 3 of his servants who had asked to come and would not be refused. Clara wore a gray dress that had belonged to her grandmother, which Aunt Mercy had altered for her in 2 evenings. Her mother did not come. Her father did not come. Evelyn did not come. Samuel Reed had broken off his engagement in November, and Evelyn had been sent to Beaufort to recover her nerves, and as far as Clara had been able to learn, she had not yet recovered them. Clara did not weep at her own wedding. She had run out of weeping she discovered somewhere between the bread and the proposal. The marriage was not easy. She had not expected it to be easy. Aunt Mercy had warned her. Mrs. Eliza had warned her. Nathaniel himself had warned her more than once that he was a man who had been alone for 6 years, and that loneliness. Once a man had been inside it long enough, became a habit he would have to learn to break. He broke it badly at first. He withdrew. He went silent for whole days. He worked too hard. Once in the 3rd month of their marriage, he did not speak to her for 2 days running. And Clara, who had grown up in a house where silence was the chief weapon, locked herself in the upstairs bedroom and wept the way she had not wept since the night they left Bellamy House. He came to the door. He sat outside it for an hour. Then he said through the wood, "Clara, I am not punishing you. It feels like punishing Nathaniel." "I know it does, my love. I know it does. I learned silence from a woman who used it for a knife. I am trying to unlearn it. I am asking you to be patient with me while I do." "How patient, Nathaniel?" "As patient, my love, as I will be when you cannot hear me say I love you, and I have to say it 3 times before you believe me." She opened the door. They wrote the rules together that night. Aunt Mercy had once told her that every marriage worth living needed rules, and that the couples who pretended otherwise were the couples who eventually drowned in the silence between them. Clara had remembered. "We will not punish each other with silence. We will not use our wounds as weapons. We will not confuse obedience with peace. We will tell the truth before resentment becomes poison." She wrote them out on a piece of paper. Nathaniel signed it. She signed it. They put it in the drawer of his writing desk, and twice in the years that followed, they took it out and read it again when the silence had begun to creep back in like damp. The first winter of their marriage, an orphaned baby girl was brought to the door of Hawthorne House. She was 4 days old. Her mother had been a laundress in town. Her mother had died in childbirth. The baby had no people. The minister had heard somewhere that Mr. Hawthorne paid for the funerals of women who died alone, and he had ridden out in the snow with the baby in his coat, and he had stood in the front hallway of Hawthorne House and said, "Sir, I did not know who else to bring her to." Nathaniel looked at Clara. He did not say anything. He did not have to. Clara took the baby. She took her into the kitchen where Mrs. Brown was already heating milk before anyone had asked her to, and she sat down by the fire and she held a 4-day-old baby for the first time in her life. And the baby looked up at her with the milky, unfocused eyes of a creature that had been alive for 96 hours. And Clara, 25 years old, married 3 seasons, raised on the certainty that she would never be a mother because she had never been chosen, burst into tears so hard that Mrs. Brown had to take the baby back. Now, ma'am, hush, hush, she is only a little thing. Mrs. Brown, hush, ma'am. Mrs. Brown, what do I? You feed her, ma'am, that is all. The rest comes after. Clara fed her. They named her Grace. The years did what years do. Grace grew. She walked at 10 months, which Mrs. Brown declared was unnatural, and she spoke in full sentences before her 2nd birthday, which Mrs. Brown declared was a sign that the Lord had a particular use for her. Clara did not argue. Clara had stopped arguing with Mrs. Brown around the same time she had stopped arguing with Aunt Mercy, which was to say almost immediately, and with a great deal of relief. Benjamin came 2 years after Grace. He was Clara's own, small and red and furious from the moment he arrived, with Nathaniel's dark hair and Clara's stubborn chin, and he was from his very first hour a child who would not be put down. Nathaniel walked the upstairs hallway with him every night for 6 months. Clara would wake at 3 in the morning and hear them the slow, steady tread of her husband on the floorboards, and the small, grumbling protest of an infant who had decided that sleep was a thing other people did. Rose came 3 years after Benjamin. She was the easy one. She was the one who slept through the night from the start, who laughed before she cried, who asked questions before she could properly form them. She was 4 years old before she stopped asking why, and that was only because she had moved on to how and what for, and who said so, which Clara found she preferred. Nathaniel never punished any of them for asking. That was the rule. That was the rule from the morning Grace had first opened her mouth and asked at the breakfast table why women were not permitted to be doctors. Clara had set down her coffee cup. Nathaniel had set down his newspaper. They had looked at each other across the table for a long moment, and then Nathaniel had said very quietly, "I do not know, Grace. I have never known. Perhaps you will be the one to make them change their mind." Grace had been 6 years old. She had repeated it back to him slowly, the way she repeated back things she meant to keep. "Perhaps I will be the one to make them change their mind." She had not forgotten it. 10 years after the night Nathaniel Hawthorne had stepped out of the rain into Bellamy House, Clara stood in her own front hallway and watched a carriage roll up the long drive of Hawthorne House. She had not been expecting visitors. She had been expecting, in fact, the cook's nephew with a barrel of apples from the upper orchard, and she had to look twice before she understood what she was seeing. It was her mother's carriage. Her mother had not crossed the threshold of Hawthorne House in 10 years. Aunt Mercy was no longer alive to comment on it. Aunt Mercy had died in the autumn of 1822, peacefully in her own bed after eating a full breakfast and pronouncing the bacon underdone. She had left her house to Clara. She had left her cane to Grace with strict instructions that the child was to use it only on people who deserved it, and to use it hard. Clara had carried that grief for 2 years. She had not in 2 years gone a single day without missing the old woman. She watched the carriage now, and felt for one bad second as though she were 9 years old again, small, breathless, waiting to be told what she had done wrong. Then Nathaniel came down the stairs behind her and put his hand briefly on the small of her back, and the second passed, and Clara was 34 years old again, and the woman in the carriage was the one who ought to be afraid. "You do not have to receive her, my love." "I know I do not, Nathaniel." "Shall I tell her you are not at home?" "No." "Clara." "I want to see her, Nathaniel. I want her to see us. I want her to walk through this hallway and look at our children, and I want to find out after 10 years whether I still owe her anything. And I do not believe I will know until I have looked her in the face." He did not argue. He had stopped arguing with her about her mother around the same time she had stopped arguing with him about Caroline, which was to say after the first year of their marriage, when they had finally understood that some wounds did not heal with conversation. They healed with witnesses. They healed when one person stayed in the room while the other did the bleeding. Abigail Whitmore had aged badly. That was the first thing Clara noticed when her mother stepped into the front parlor. The bony hands, the thin mouth, the gray at her temples that had been the dark color of Clara's own hair only 10 years before. Her father had died 4 winters back of a chill that had turned to fever, and Clara had not been at the funeral. She had not been invited. She had read about it in the parish notices, and had wept for an afternoon, not for him precisely, but for the fact that he had lived and died inside the same silence that had killed him long before the fever had. Her mother had been alone since. "Clara." "Mama?" "You are looking—" "Sit down, Mama." Her mother sat. Behind her in the doorway, Evelyn Bellamy hovered. That was the second thing Clara noticed, and it took her a longer moment to understand. Evelyn had come too. Evelyn, who had not been spoken of in the parish for 3 years, who had married late and married badly to a cotton trader from Mobile, who had been left a widow at 32 without children and without inheritance, and who had returned to Charleston the previous spring to live with her aging mother in the Bellamy house her brothers had inherited. Evelyn looked tired. She did not look beautiful anymore. She still had the bones of beauty, the cheekbones, the dark eyes, but the prettiness had thinned out of her face, and what was left was the face of a woman who had spent 10 years being told that beauty was a currency and had only recently understood that the bank had closed. "Cousin Evelyn." "Cousin Clara. It has been a long time." "It has." "Sit, please." Evelyn sat. The conversation that followed was not the conversation Clara had braced herself for. Her mother did not ask forgiveness. Her mother did not weep. Her mother sat with her hands folded in her lap and spoke about the weather, about the rice harvest, about a cousin in Savannah who had recently lost a husband, and Clara understood slowly and with a kind of grief that her mother had not come to apologize. Her mother had come because she had nowhere else to go. Her mother was old and lonely, and the parish had begun to whisper about her after Mr. Whitmore's death, and the daughter she had cast out had married up so well that there was now a social cost to not visiting Hawthorne House, and Abigail Whitmore had calculated the cost and the benefit, and here she was. Clara understood it. She did not blame her for it. She also did not soften. When Mrs. Brown brought the tea, the children came in. They came in the way children always came into the front parlor. Grace first, because Grace went first into every room of her life. Then Benjamin, who had grown gangly at 8 and was forever in a hurry. Then 4-year-old Rose, who had to be coaxed and who arrived clutching a small stuffed dog Nathaniel had won her at a county fair the previous summer. Grace was 16. She walked into the parlor like a woman who had been told her whole life that the world belonged to her and had believed it because nobody had ever bothered to tell her otherwise. She had Clara's plain features and Nathaniel's slate-gray eyes, and she carried herself with the particular straightness of a girl who had been raised by Mrs. Brown. "Mama, you wished us to come down." "Yes, Grace, I wish you to meet your grandmother and your cousin Evelyn." "Ma'am." Grace dipped her head politely. "Cousin." "Goodness, Clara." Her mother's voice had thinned. She is. "Tall, Mama. The word you are looking for is tall." "She has your father's chin." "She has nothing of my father's, Mama. She is not blood, she is mine, and that is sufficient." Evelyn was staring at Grace. Clara watched her cousin stare. She watched Evelyn measure the girl up and down, the way Evelyn had once measured Clara herself, and she felt her hand close around the arm of her chair before she had decided to move. "Cousin." Evelyn's voice was light, careful. She is striking. What does she intend to be when she is grown?" "I intend to be a doctor, ma'am." Evelyn laughed. It was not a cruel laugh exactly. It was the small, automatic laugh of a woman who had spent her entire life laughing at things that were not funny because laughter had been her armor. But Clara saw Grace's chin lift. She saw her daughter's eyes narrow just slightly. She saw Benjamin behind his sister take half a step forward, as if to put himself between his sister and the woman in the chair. Clara set down her tea. "Cousin Evelyn." "Cousin. In this house, children are not born to decorate the lives of others." The room went still. They are not born, cousin, to be looked at. They are not born to be measured. They are not born to be married off to settle a parent's debts. They are born to become themselves. We have made that clear to them since they could speak. We have made it clear to Grace since she was 4 years old and asked me at this very table whether women were permitted to be doctors. We told her the truth, cousin. We told her we did not know why women were not permitted, and that perhaps she would be the one to find out. Nathaniel had come into the doorway behind her. Clara had not heard him come. She did not need to. "They are born," he said quietly, "to become themselves." Grace was watching them both. She was watching them with the attention of a girl who had heard those words said in her presence many times and was understanding perhaps for the first time that they were not ordinary words. That the parents who said them to her every morning were not the kind of parents most girls had. That she had been raised without her quite noticing inside a house that had been designed quietly, carefully over 16 years to make her into the woman who was now standing in front of a grandmother she had never met, and a cousin she did not know, and who was not afraid of either of them. Evelyn lowered her eyes to her tea. She did not laugh again. When the children had been dismissed back to the schoolroom, and Mrs. Brown had carried out the empty cups, Clara's mother spoke for the first time in 20 minutes. "Clara." "Yes, Mama." You have done well here." "I have, Mama." Your father before he died, he asked after you. He asked whether you were happy." "Did he, Mama?" "I told him you were." "You did not know whether I was, Mama." I did not, Clara. I did not. But I told him you were, because I could not. I could not say to him on his deathbed that I had not asked." Clara was quiet for a long time. "Mama, I am happy. I am very happy. I have been happy for 10 years. You would not have known how to look at it if you had come. I do not say that to wound you. I say it because it is true. The kind of happiness Nathaniel and I have built in this house is not the kind of happiness you taught me to recognize. It is not made of suitors. It is not made of dowries. It is not made of being chosen. It is made of being seen by one good person every morning of your life, and seeing him back, and knowing that the children we have raised will not have to learn what we had to learn." Her mother's hands were trembling. "Clara, You do not have to say it, Mama. I have come to say it. You have come because you are alone, Mama. I know that. I do not despise you for it. I am only telling you that you do not need to apologize today. You may apologize if you wish in time. You may come to know my children if they wish it in time. But I will not require it. I have been requiring nothing of you for 10 years. I am not going to start now." Her mother began to weep. Clara did not get up to hold her. She did not at this point have it in her to comfort the woman who had slapped her across a breakfast table for answering a question honestly. But she did, after a moment, reach across the small table between them and lay her hand over her mother's. "It is enough, Mama, that you came." That night, after the visitors had gone, Clara stood in the library at Hawthorne House with her husband. He had not lit the lamps. He was standing by the window, looking out at the long sweep of his land in the dusk, the way he had stood at windows for as long as she had known him. He turned when she came in. He held out his hand. She took it. "Clara." "Nathaniel." "You did well today." "I did not feel that I did, my love." "You did. You did better than I could have. I would have asked her to leave." "I almost did." "Why did you not?" Clara was quiet for a while. "Because I wanted Grace to see it. I wanted Grace to see her mother sit across from the grandmother who threw her out and not crumble. I wanted Grace to know that the woman who raised her had been raised by a woman who could not love her and had survived it and had become—" She stopped. She did not have the word. "Whole," Nathaniel said. "Yes. You are whole, Clara. I am, my love. I did not used to be. I am now." He turned her toward him. He put his hands on her face. He looked at her the way he had been looking at her since the night he had walked out of the rain line by line, without flinching, without pity, without any of the gentle blurring that other men's eyes had used on her whole life. "Clara. Nathaniel. I still think of her sometimes. Caroline. I know you do, my love. And the girl, Sally. I still think of her. I dreamed of her last week. I have not told you. You should have told me. I am telling you now." "What did you dream, Nathaniel?" "That she was a grown woman, Clara. That she had not died. That she had grown up and married and had children of her own. And that she came to the door of this house, and I opened it, and she was not angry with me. She only asked if she might come in. And I said yes." Clara held his face in her hands. "Nathaniel." "Yes, my love. Grief is not proof that you failed her. It is proof that you changed." He was silent for a long time. Then he said in a voice she had heard from him perhaps 4 times in 10 years. "You taught me that, Clara. You taught me that being seen does not have to mean being condemned. And you," she said, "taught me that being loved does not require becoming smaller." He kissed her forehead. Not her mouth. Her forehead, the way a man kisses a woman he has been kissing for 10 years and intends to be kissing for 40 more. Then she went upstairs to look in on her children. Grace was reading by lamplight, her dark head bent over a book of anatomy that Mrs. Eliza had brought her from Beaufort the previous month. She did not look up when Clara came in. She only said without lifting her eyes, "Mama, did you mean it? What you said today? About what we are born to become?" "I meant it, Grace. Do you mean it for me, specifically? Even if it is hard. Even if no medical college in this country will let me sit the examinations. I mean it for you, Grace, specifically. We will find a college, my love. If it is in Philadelphia, we will go to Philadelphia. If it is in Edinburgh, we will go to Edinburgh. Your father has already written letters." Grace looked up. He has written 6 letters, Grace. He began writing them when you were 9. He did not tell you because he did not wish you to feel the weight of them. But they are written, and they will be sent when the time comes." Grace put her book down. "Mama." "Yes, my love." "I think I am going to cry." "That is permitted in this house, Grace." "I know it is, Mama." Benjamin was already asleep, sprawled across his bed with one foot hanging off the edge and a book open on his chest. Clara closed the book. She moved his foot back onto the mattress. He grumbled something in his sleep and turned over. Rose was sitting up in bed waiting for her, the stuffed dog clutched against her chest. "Mama, was that lady really my grandmother?" She was Rose. "Why did she look so sad?" "Because she has been alone for a long time, Rose." "Why has she been alone, Mama?" "Because she did not know how to love the people she had, my love. And by the time she wanted to learn, the people she had were gone." Rose considered this with the gravity of a 4-year-old who has been told the truth her whole life and expects no less from her mother. "Mama, will I be alone like that?" "No, Rose, you will not." "How do you know, Mama?" "Because you live in this house, my love. And in this house we do not let each other become alone. That is the rule." "Is that the rule, Mama?" "That is the rule, Rose. From now until forever. Go to sleep." Clara stood in the doorway of her daughter's room until the breathing slowed. Then she closed the door very softly and walked the long upstairs hallway of the house she had walked into 10 years before as a frightened 25-year-old bride who had not known whether she was capable of being loved. She had not, she realized, escaped her old life by being chosen by a man. She had escaped it the night she had stood up from a supper table at Bellamy House, looked her mother in the face, and refused to sit back down. She had escaped it the morning she had walked out into Aunt Mercy's garden with red eyes and made up her mind. She had escaped it every day for 10 years, in every small choice she had made, to speak, to answer, to not become smaller, to not punish her children with the silences she had been raised inside. She had escaped it finally by choosing herself. And every woman who came after her in this house, Grace and Rose and the daughters. those girls would one day raise, and the daughters those daughters would raise after them would be born into a house that had already been built for them by a woman who had been told her whole life that she was nothing and had decided at 24 years old in the middle of a summer storm that she was wrong. Clara Whitmore. Hawthorne walked the length of her own hallway in her own house in the dark, and she was not afraid, and she was not ashamed, and she was not alone. She had won.